So, John, Rudy Giuliani has returned to the scene. Well, I thought that we had heard the last of him when he was deemed to be too off the wall, even for Donald Trump. But I guess Trump has run out of people who he could hire to represent him. And so here's Rudy Giuliani. He's been on the job, depending on who you listen to. If it's Donald Trump, it's only been about 12 hours. But the reality has been it's about 3 weeks. And it seems like ages ago, but Giuliani at the beginning of the week, at the end of the last week, was out on a 2-day media blitz on behalf of Donald Trump. Just characterize what you think he was attempting to do.
Well, I think what he was attempting to do wasn't quite as crazed as it may have seemed to a lot of people. There's a couple of things to put in play here. First off, I think that one of the reasons that Trump's competent lawyers departed or kind of stepped away from the case and stepped away from Trump in a lot of places was because they recognized that this fight was changing. The fight between Trump and the special counsel, the fight even between Trump and Congress, was changing into something that was far more likely to be parallel to Nixon 74, and rather than, some sort of back and forth struggle, about legal issues. That this was really getting into some very, very serious constitutional questions and some very, very serious accountability questions. So suddenly you see this Flood guy come into the White House, right? This is a guy who's an expert in impeachment and in executive overreach, so to speak, and defending executive overreach, defending executive actions. At the same time,
we should just say this is Emmett Flood, and
right.
He was served, I think, as special counsel in the George W. Bush administration.
Yes, he did. And then also traces back to the Clinton days.
And he served as counsel for Clinton during the impeachment. So it definitely, there's something anticipatory here that's going on in hiring this guy.
100%. Because remember, some people had a hard time in their head putting that stuff together, Clinton era into the Bush era. The way to put it together is this guy is an expert on seeking to extend the authority of the presidency beyond what the Constitution intended and basically what the courts have permitted. So this is a guy who really works in the area of saying, no, you can't hold the president to account on this or that or whatever issue. But he's a pro and he's a very good lawyer, whether you like him or not. He's good at what he does. He comes in there. At the same time, Giuliani comes in, and he's not coming in because of his legal expertise. Giuliani is coming in as a politician. He's coming in to kind of blow a lot of things up, stretch out the limits of the discussion. And his job on all those TV appearances was to leak, although it wasn't really a leak, it was an announcement, was to leak information that they knew was going to come out. His job was to go and say, oh, yeah, Trump did pay for that, or, oh, yeah, Trump knew about that, or, oh, yeah, Trump, there was some money there that was associated with Trump, or we knew this guy. And to say it very confidently as if, of course, everybody knows that, right? Well, the reality is Trump and his people have been denying these things. And suddenly Giuliani's out there saying, oh, yeah, of course that's the case. Now, that's a political strategy. The problem was that there's a lot of evidence that Giuliani he came in fast. He has not read up sufficiently on the case. He was looking at some political plays, not recognizing other challenges, especially as regards campaign finance law. And so Giuliani blew a lot of things up. He created some new messes for Trump as part of a broader strategy that was supposed to eliminate some of Trump's challenges. Overall, I would say I'd give Giuliani about a 75% negative rating. Basically, I think he did more harm than good. But for progressives, for people who want to think about this stuff, it's important to pause and recognize that while Giuliani has seemed ridiculous at some points, And while he has even been called out, at least to some extent, by the president, he wasn't just operating completely seat of the pants. There is some strategy here.
All right. Yeah. And I want to get into that. And before we get into what your sense of that strategy is, do you think, I mean, if I hear what you're saying correctly on some level, that Emmett Flood is brought in for almost the inside game, if you will, where he is, this guy is well versed in the law. He knows the limits and the boundaries of presidential authority. He understands how Congress will operate. It's almost anticipating on some notion that there may be a nascent movement to impeach Trump in the near or relatively near future, and that Giuliani is brought in to do the sort of more public relations thing to, I guess maybe provide cover for the legal theories that might be proffered internally or more within the government, and that I guess your suggestion is that when we watch Rudy Giuliani, our first instinct might be to issue in New York City, we call it a silver alert, for the guy who's wandering the streets, or we might our first instinct might be to call the family and see if they've taken him in for a physical recently to make sure that everything's okay. But in fact, some of this may be, I don't know. Are you suggesting some of it may be by design, or do you think that it was let me put it this way before we get into the strategy. Do you think that what we're looking at is a misdesigned strategy, or are we looking at poor execution of a strategy?
You put a lot on the table there. All of it. Your interpretation is correct. Where you're headed is good. It is, in my opinion, for Trump, a necessary strategy, right? If you are Trump's legal team, there are going to be some profound revelations as regards Trump. They knew that stuff was coming. They know that Cohen's office was raided. They know that this is, the attorney Michael Cohen. They know that Mueller, as well as other folks, have a lot more information than has come out. And so they decide to send Rudy Giuliani out to inoculate, to say, oh, yeah, of course, you do know this, right? You understand this. Well, this is how it works. Now, to a lot of us, we're thinking, wow, Rudy Giuliani, he just stepped in it. He just acknowledged all this bad stuff. And indeed he did. But part of that is to say, and remember where he did his initial appearances on Fox, part of it is to say to the Trump base, yeah, just be ready. This stuff's coming. Be aware of this. And then to begin to frame out the defenses. Now, strategically, that's not so dumb, but it was terrible execution because Giuliani went too far. He's theatrical. He is a politician. He's no longer the lawyer that he once was. He still has his law degree, of course, but he's playing a political game, and he overtalked it. It wasn't the initial comments that Giuliani made that were the problem. It was when he got a question, and he just basically said whatever came into his head. So he did damage there. But again, if we step back, understand some of the stuff he was saying, and this is very important, Sam. You'll understand this. Your listeners.
All right, well, John, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about that. I just have to say, before we do that, I am reminded of an appearance that Giuliani had earlier in the week, or maybe it was the end of last week, on Fox and Friends, where he was making the case that this payment to Stormy Daniels had nothing to do with the campaign, absolutely nothing. And literally 90 seconds later, he is responding to a question from one of the Fox and Friends where he says, well, you got to remember when this was. It was in the middle of the campaign. Can you imagine if that had come out then? And he had completely unwound his talking point 90 seconds earlier, just because he was getting the attention from these Fox and Friends hosts. All right, but when we come back, let's talk about the really disturbing part that you picked up on, that I have yet to see people really focus in on, because this gives us an indication as to where Donald Trump's entire, I guess, legal team anticipates going. We got to take a quick break. I'm talking to the great John Nichols. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. We'll be right back.